Welcome, everyone, to the SOM podcast. I'm your host, Bridgette Chatman, and I have a wonderful guest with me today. This gentleman, Michael Pellegrino, is a Hollywood talent agent, but he is also just crazy passionate about our criminal justice system as well as our penal system. And he's got a lot to say. We've got a lot to dive into. And I want to welcome you, Michael. Thank you for coming on today. And it's just such a pleasure to meet with you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my absolute pleasure. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As am I. So did you want to tell the audience any more about yourself? I can perhaps say how I met your acquaintance through an attorney friend. And you were working on some movies. And he made me aware that there was this one great movie that was social justice focused. And I think you were a part of it, a big part of it. And when I watched it, I just fell in love with the entire film. I mean, the project to me was just profound. And then you made me aware of a book that had been written by Ice-T and a childhood friend.
Spike.
And I believe his name was,
Spike.
can
He
you
goes
call
by
it?
Spike. He goes by Spike.
Spike, that's it. I didn't want to mess it up. But
No.
I read that book one evening, and it just it just reverberated with me so in a way that it just shook me. It just shook me. And I've always been pretty passionate about crime, why it happens, why some people end up, in our penal system and others don't. And that book was able to articulate to me why some folks get caught up and others don't. And, who they are at the very essence and core as people, as human beings, and really understanding that. And then looking at our penal system, I was able to kind of dissect and say, I think something's going terribly wrong here. Something's terribly wrong. So those were two really wonderful projects that turned out to be very successful, that you were a part of, that I really, really appreciated you making me aware of them and staying on top of this. So as a result, I became active with the reentry program in my congressional district back in Illinois. Right now, I'm in Atlanta. I'm equally as passionate about Atlanta and Illinois. But I'm on the reentry committee with our congressman, and he was the congressman that was responsible for the Second Chance Act. And for those of you out there that don't know what the Second Chance Act is basically an act that went through Congress, the 110th Congressional Congress, in 2007 and 8, and it was just renewed, for lack of better wording, in 2018. So it is it's an active bill that's out, legislation that has been passed, and it's to reduce recidivism and to come up with programming and ideas and structure that will make our society better at large and give folks a second chance. So with all that said, I talk a lot. Sometimes I talk hard and fast. I'm a Chi-Town girl, so it's just in me.
I get it. I'm a Chi-Town
So
boy.
tell us a little bit about yourself, Michael.
Well, I grew up obviously in Chicago as well. Spent a little time in New York, but I'm an
Well,
Austin.
can you talk up just a little bit or turn your volume up?
Oh, sure. Everything seems to be on point. Can you not hear me? Can you guys not hear me on your end?
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit. I wish I could hear you a little bit more.
Everything's okay on my end.
Perfect. Perfect.
Are you okay?
We're fine now.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
But I'm definitely, I'm a Chicago guy too. Grew up in the Austin district, which is sadly probably the most violent district there is right now in Chicago.
Yeah.
But I grew up there almost my entire life, had the opportunity of living in New York for a while and Los Angeles. But I'm extreme, I'm a talent agent. I commute a lot between New York and LA. We rep a lot of celebrities. We do packaging for film and TV, but I have always been a big advocate of prison reform and how to fix things. I was very instrumental. Actually, I was the person that started the very first educational program in Nevada when there was nothing there. And it really disturbed me because I don't think a lot of people understand crime happens everywhere. That's a whole nother subject. Some people are a product of their environment and things happen. You get caught up in something and you make a mistake. The whole point is when you enter into the system doesn't give you the opportunity not to come back. It's not built that way. The recidivism rate for state penitentiaries is almost peaking at 80%, meaning the chances of you coming back into the system and being rearrested and going back to prison is 80%. That's a horrible number. Now, when you look at the federal side of people that enter into a federal penitentiary and they get released, the recidivism rate drops to about 38%. That's a drastic drop compared to the state system. And I think that across all states, California, their recidivism rate right now is running around 65%. That's a horrible number. Chicago is literally at that 80% threshold now of when somebody commits a crime, they're going to come back into that system. And I think one of the things that I've been a big advocate about is once somebody enters, we need to figure out how do we prevent them from re-entering. And that was one of the things with this, Chicago was one of the first states to ever implement the second chance program, where it gave inmates an opportunity to actually be hired by the state to get city jobs.
Yeah.
And it was a gigantic success, but it's not a constant across all states. Every state runs differently. There's a lot of private penitentiaries. And let's just face it, the penitentiary system in general, when it comes to the state, is to incarcerate. It's not to rehabilitate. And people want to know, well, oh my gosh, crime is so high. What's happening? We're not giving people the opportunity to better themselves, to come out and be a better citizen. We're just putting somebody into the prison system, holding them till their expiration date comes where they get paroled. And literally there's no support system. Your date comes when you're going to get released. They give you an X amount of dollars, which is roughly around $21. They give you a bus ticket and they drop you off at the worst neighborhood in the world. And you're left right there in the middle of
where you started.
Yeah, you have nothing.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to the federal system, they have a little bit better program because federal, 6 months prior to your date of release, you're sent to a halfway house. And, sometimes they'll try to put you close to where you live, and sometimes they'll send you across the country. But the whole thing is they start to work a system to help you re-enter society where it gives you the opportunity to find, you go to the halfway house, you start to find a job, you try to find a place to live, they make sure you have a bank account. They at least give you the opportunity of start putting your life together before they literally let you out the door and you start to re-enter into society. It's a little bit slower process that gives people the opportunity for success. It's a better rate.
Yeah.
But we have to find a way of prison reform across the board with the state system as well, because, you know, the state penitentiaries are overfilled to the max. People that really don't belong incarcerated, even though they've committed a crime, there's a little bit better way to deal with it. And then there's those people that they deserve to be locked up and throw away the key because they're just wired wrong and they're not going to ever be fixed.
Yeah.
But that's far and few in between. That might be
Mhm.
3 to 5%.
Yeah.
The rest of the people are not given opportunity.
Right. So let me give the audience some numbers in real time. According to the US Bureau of Justice and Statista are two of my sources. There's approximately 1.2 million that are incarcerated in our country. We've got approximately 330 million people here. And it's growing. It could be inching up to 340 shortly. But I will give you the top 5 countries in the world of the most incarcerated. So China, 1.69 million people in China are incarcerated, but China has a population of approximately 1.5 billion with a B, not million, billion with a B. Behind China is the United States, 1.6754 million, and we've got 330 million people approximately here. Something is wrong with that number. That China could have 1.5 billion people and only 1.69 million are incarcerated, yet we have relatively the same number with 330 million people that are incarcerated. Further, Brazil, the third country, 835,000 people incarcerated with 215 million people. India is behind Brazil with 554 some odd thousand people incarcerated with almost 1.3 billion people. And they only have 500,000 people incarcerated. The Russian Federation, 439,000 and incarcerated with 143 million people approximately. So the numbers to me are a little bit off, which means to me with the highly democratized country that we are, with the vast resources that we have, why are there so many people incarcerated? It is astounding. I think that we're putting our attention in the wrong places, because if you look at the economies and the gross domestic product, which is the combination of all goods and services in any given country of what they make, China's economy is 19.7 trillion. Their debt is under their economy, which means they're doing okay. Our economy of everything that we make in this country is about 26.8 trillion, and our debt is 32 trillion. So to me, when I look at that number, I look at the incarcerated, I go, we had better start spending our time wisely and our money wisely, so that who we incarcerate, how we incarcerate, and the system that puts them back on the street gets better, because our economy is going to continue to tank if our position in the world is that we carry the most debt and then we're not making as much as we carry the debt on. Then it tells me that as a country, we're in trouble.
Well, the system's broken. The system's broken. It's just
Yeah.
that simple. When you enter into the penitentiary, there is no education. You know, most of the people that enter into the state system, they don't have a GED. It would be beneficial that we put together a program that literally helps an individual get educated. Even if it's a high school diploma, at least they have the basics. Nobody even can comprehend right now unless they've walked into the shoes of an individual. People don't know how to write a check out. They don't know what a bank card is. They don't know how to get a mortgage. They don't know how to take care of their bills. They need the fundamental basics of being taught how life works, and they weren't taught that. So when they're in the system, you're being warehoused. Why not take the time, if they committed a crime, and start to figure out, how do we educate this individual so when they do get out, they become a productive citizen? The first thing would be education. The second thing would be, well, let's find a trade for this individual, match them up. People that go into the system, a lot of times develop psychological problems and stuff like that, depression, things that maybe they didn't have or was a precondition, but they're suffering from it. They need to be treated, evaluated on a mental status to see where they're at, and try to make sure that they're okay, if they need medication, if they need counseling. And then you got to figure out, okay, once those things have been established, we need to have a system put into place when a person is getting ready to leave that system. Not only do they have some form of an education, some kind of stability when it comes to making sure that their mental health is intact, but we need to have job fairs. We need to be able, prior to them leaving, we need to start building a foundation for them. When they do get released, they have a place to live, they have a job. We need to give them the fundamental basics to succeed. People aren't being given that. They're just being incarcerated. They let them out on the street. And what do you expect? I mean, I'm not condoning anybody committing a crime, but I understand that at the end of the day, it's a matter of an individual is just going to go back doing what they did because they don't know any better. And they should. But once again, it goes back to a product of environment. If you're raised in that environment where it's never taught you how to be a great citizen, or you've never been given the opportunity of education, how do you expect somebody to act? I mean, it's kind of just common sense. Let's build a foundation for them to re-enter into that's solid, that gives them a great opportunity of success, a better number. The recidivism rate would drop drastically.
Absolutely.
But instead, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I apologize.
No.
But it's just very disturbing because we have now gone into private prison system, and it's a joke because it's about money. All these people are getting rich off of incarcerating people, judges, lawyers.
I'm going to stop you there with the privatization of prison systems. And I'm going to back up just a little bit and elaborate on the recidivism rate and why, to make sure that our audience just really understands that, nobody's giving a free pass. But what we're trying to do is create a productive society where folks can jump into our capitalist society and play a part and make a living. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make our country better, when you have more citizens that are contributing as opposed to being tucked away and housed in a prison system that is costing taxpayers tremendous amounts of money. And the privatization, which we'll talk about in a bit, is just another corporation that makes money. So
Absolutely.
with regard to the recidivism rate, if we look locally and dissect it state by state, and we can go down to the county jails, city jails, whatever, there's a very high number, especially in certain states that are just crime ridden, such as Chicago, big metropolitan areas, New York as well. if you take a look at the entire number of the recidivism rate, which is roughly about 44% overall, why is it that almost half the people that come out of prison go right back into prison? Now, we talked about some things. You dump them right into the same environment, and you could have the will of, a very strong will to do what's right. But if you can't get a job, because you have to check that box that you're a felon, you can't get a checking account. You can't get a debit card. You can't get an apartment to live. What would we expect anyone to do? It
Well,
becomes survival of the fittest. You're going to go back.
that's my whole point is we are not giving the proper tools when somebody does do something wrong and they do get incarcerated. Let's try to figure out how to make them a better person. You have to categorize somebody. There's certain categories of individuals that get incarcerated. And I'll say it again. There are just a few people that you're not going to fix them. Somebody that is a child molester, somebody that is a rapist, they are psychologically wired wrong. And I really don't care what anybody says. I'll debate them all day long. You're not going to fix them. They're wired in a way that you just can't fix that individual. But somebody, we're looking at probably 75% of the people that are in the system are drugs. And it's not like they're kingpins, they're users. They're literally committing a crime to feed into their habit, and they do something wrong. While that person is in the system, that is the time to try to help that person get clean and sober. It's a time to educate them. It's a time to make them a productive individual. So when they do come out, the recidivism rate is not where it's at right now. They literally, like we just said, and we'll say it again, probably 10 more times. We need to have a system put in place nationally, not state by state. It needs to be a national system implemented into the state system, first of all, where there's a recipe, and the recipe follows, that all the ingredients of when a person enters the prison system, they're going to be evaluated, put into a category, and you're going to find out all about that individual and give them opportunities of a trade. Not everybody's going to come out and be a businessman or whatever, but you can give somebody the opportunity to learn a trade while they're in there. And that way, when they do come out, they're going to be productive because they have an opportunity to literally go out there and make money and be a citizen and pay taxes. But we also have to work on when they start to enter the system. You said it perfectly. Individuals have this gigantic black mark on them. Somebody sells a couple grams of cocaine, they whatever, and they're doing 2-3 years. They come out, that strike is going to stop them from getting a home, from getting an apartment. They literally are blackballed from
society.
You have no opportunity whatsoever. When you go and get a job, well, you got to check that little box and say, well, I'm a felon. I committed a crime. Well, you're instantly going to be put at the bottom of the pile. You're not getting the job. Correct. Nobody's going to give you the opportunity because they don't understand the facts of what mistake you made. They don't want to hear it. You check the box, you're at the bottom of the thing. Right. There's so many things that need to be fixed with reform, and the people that are now that are looking at it are in charge of form, which Congress. They don't understand the system. They think they do, but they don't.
Correct. And to a very important point, we had some very wrong-headed policy in this country. Just say no to drugs was one. I think that was the Reagan administration
Yes,
And it's like, okay, so if it's a neurological, um, um, a drug that gets in your system and tells your brain you need the drug, like an opioid, how do you just say no? How do you just say no? And then you incarcerate the people in droves, and you go and you start profiling in these areas where these people are that are buying and selling and feeding a neurological habit that just happen to be in their neighborhoods, to make money. And the cycle just goes. So we incarcerated droves of people under the Reagan administration, and then the Clinton administration followed up. And it was just all kind of disastrous, the policies. And so you ended up with a penal system. You had folks in jail for doing menial, crimes, petty crimes for so many years because they were addicted to drugs. What do you do with that person? Okay. You give them a certificate, you let them go to school when they're in prison. They can get a dog grooming certificate. They can become a paralegal. You can get a college degree in some prison systems. But what do you do with that when you get out? You can't find a job because of the way our criminal justice system is comprised with legislation, state to state, and some federal legislation that if you're a felon, up until recently, you couldn't vote.
right.
23 states, let people vote without restriction after they've done their time. And then there are other states that set up all these circumstances and situations and hurdles that you have to go through to be able to vote. It really is state dependent. But I digress from that. I want our systems to be sound enough that we're smart enough as a democratized society to understand that when people get out of a system that has nothing in it, it's going to be more nothing when they get on the street and they're going to go back to that system. You're losing people, valuable people that could contribute to society. And so when I hear you say that you designed a curriculum, it was almost, we've talked about this before, but I'll let you elaborate on it for the audience. And I have a curriculum, entrepreneurship. It's an 8-month course that really teaches you how to run a business. If you can't find work, you'll get work because your mind is pretty darn good, but yours, you really came up with something that I coined as adulting classes, teaching folks what a checking account is, what it does, how it's important to save money, how to write a check. Not that, that's a big thing now, but just to be literal enough to know what a check is if you're given the check, what all the writing is about and what the numbers are at the bottom so that you can cash it, so to speak. It's astounding to me that we're missing so much and we're excluding so many people that could be contributors to society by throwing them away in a system that ends up costing so much money per taxpayer. So much money.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just a waste. So talk to me about your program that you implemented and was very successful in Nevada.
Well, I mean, when I was younger, I definitely was not a perfect child, and I made some mistakes in my life, and I paid for them, and I'm lucky enough that I actually became very successful at what I do. But I literally was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I ended up having to spend some time courtesy of the state. And when I was younger, I was there, but I had a college education already. And when I went into the system, I was flabbergasted at all of these individuals that literally had no clue whatsoever. None of them had a GED, had never been to high school. People stole the car, they stole drugs, um, petty, not nothing that was horrific. These people are fixable. And I decided to take it upon myself to start putting something together. And I went literally and lobbied to the Bureau of Nevada that I would want to put a program together that would teach basic math, anger management classes,
Mhm.
everything you could have possibly imagine. And I ended up getting the attention of a gentleman I'll never, ever forget. He was fantastic. He was the superintendent of the school district, and his name was John Francis. And he came to visit me. And he's like, I heard you're trying to do this. You're having a difficult time. I'm like, I need teachers to come here and help teach these guys. I go, and I can put a booklet together on different kinds of things I would like to work on, but I would like a program where if people want to, because they have to be willing to. If you
Yes.
don't want to, if you don't want something, you can't make somebody. And that's another thing. But if you sit and you talk to people and you say, look, you want a better life, I'll help you. You want to go back and do what you did and come back here in 6 more years, that's your business. But you're just going to go around and around and around, and you're never going to ever be successful. I can help you become a better person. And I'm talking hundreds of people came to this lecture inside the penitentiary, and they listened. And I'm like, I would like you guys to start taking these classes and start teaching basic arithmetic, basic English, all the basics. And before you know it, they all wanted to start getting their GED. John Francis was so nice and wonderful. He got volunteer teachers to come and administer tests on a weekly basis to the penitentiary. And these guys were starting to get their GED. Well, I got one step further, and I'm like, okay, now we're teaching these guys the basics of how to get an education, but we need to teach them the basics of how to live life.
Yeah.
And that was another class. It was basic life skills. How do you go and write a check? How do you go and find an apartment? How do you fill a lease out? How do you go and get a job and put a resume together? And I started to implement a booklet, a system for these guys to follow. And it
Mhm.
started to work. I mean, it literally started to work. And
Because
then
that's a level of education that they've not embarked on before, and no one
Never.
cared to even think that this is what's needed in the marketplace, so to speak. Tell me this, Michael, because we're gonna have to wrap up in a short amount of time here. If we could do something together, or if you could do something to change our system, what would that be? Where would we start?
Well, I might run for Congress. I'll tell you right now.
Wow.
I have
I thought
really
I dreamt that, but you did tell me that.
told you that.
That's
And
that would be awesome.
because I think there needs to be a voice that's literally going to be on the side of the people that need a voice. And right now, I don't think they have one.
Mhm.
If I had the opportunity, I really would like to make it where there is a internal system across the board to literally do exactly what we've been discussing for the last 30, 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's get them basic skills. Let's help people prepare for reentry into society. The last thing that I did in Nevada is I talked everybody into letting me hold a job fair. Everybody thought I was crazy. They're like, there is nobody coming. I had US Foods.
Yes.
They literally came, and I apologize about that. They literally came and had a job fair And we're pre-hiring guys and ladies to
Mhm.
come.
Sorry about that, Michael. We had a technical glitch and, but picking up where we left off, you were talking about potentially running for Congress, to, offer some better legislation and laws that could be on the books that would help our recidivism rate and, our penal system reform overall. Um, and you were also speaking to what specifically might need to happen in order to make it worthwhile. So can we pick up there and just kind of briefly wrap it up?
Absolutely. So I've been asked from several people if I would actually consider doing something like that, and I've taken it under consideration. And the more and more violence that is occurring in Chicago, the more and more I keep thinking it might not be a bad idea. So I'm really taking it under advisement right now with the people that I work for, and we're going to see, we're going to explore it. But no matter what, I would like to work with some people that are already embedded in Congress and, go to Washington and try to lay down the foundations for the possibility of implementing a better process of prison reform for people that are currently incarcerated. I can't help the people that to keep them out of jail the first time, but I sure in hell can help them stay out of jail the next time. And I think that's what we got to really focus on is the reentry program on how to keep people, to give them the opportunity to have a fresh start. Just about one, and I want to make that very clear, just about everybody does deserve a second chance. Mistakes happen. It's life. And if you told me you never made a mistake in your life, you're fooling nobody because everybody's made mistakes.
It's just an out and out lie.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's life, but I really feel that, you and I have spoken so many times together. We're very passionate about the prison system and how the penal system is really put together and how broken it is. I
Yeah,
really think it needs a voice. It needs a loud
definitely.
voice, and I have a loud voice.
No doubt about that. And I want everyone that's listening to this particular podcast episode to call their congressmen, call their state legislators, and let them know that criminal justice reform has to happen. Our penal system is broken, and there's something that we can do about it. There's absolutely something we can do about it. Together, I think that, things work better in numbers, especially when it's a movement to change something. That's how laws and amendments got on our books and made our world better. And the world at large looks at us as the free leader of the world and democracy and thinking innovatively. As you were thinking about your program, I think about my entrepreneurship course. We've
Right.
got to do something. And together, I know that we can make this world a better place. I know it. I know it. Michael, if there's anything or any take or leave behind that you could impart on an audience, what would that be?
I think one of the most important things is really for people to realize that we need to fix a lot of things that are broken right now. And there's a lot of people that have made mistakes, but you can't give up on people. And if we really, really stick together and we really do want to change, we have to speak up. Our voice needs to be heard. And I want them to go away with the thought that there's hope at the end of the day. It just has to, people have to hear what we're saying, and they have to follow. We have to put together something that is going to help make the world a better place. And by doing that is fixing the internal problem of the prison system. And I think that people just need to be conscious that people make mistakes. We can't literally just throw them away and say that's it. everybody needs a little bit of help in life to make it. And if we do that, we would have a much, much better society. And
I
I hope
agree.
people agree with me on that.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And on that note, Michael Pellegrino, thank you so much for joining me today. And what you have imparted on our audience has been insightful. It has been thorough. And I wish you all the best if your exploratory committee deems it necessary and possible for you to get out there and be that voice for the criminal justice system and the penal system, amongst many other things. And our Congress, all the best to you, all the best to you. Thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you to our audience for listening. And again, if you want to help make things better, please write into your congressmen, your state legislators, and let them know our criminal justice system and our penal system have got to have adequate and meaningful reform. This is a Souls of Many podcast, real talk, real news, real people all the time. I'm your host, Bridgette Chatman, and thank you, Michael Pellegrino, for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great one.